Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Ethan crouched low, his breath barely a whisper in the cool night air. The forest around him was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, but he kept his focus on the distant glow of the alien patrols moving through the trees. Their harsh, metallic voices echoed through the woods, a constant reminder of the invaders who had taken everything from him. It had been 6 months since the Kael'var Dominion had descended upon Haven, the once peaceful colony planet where Ethan had grown up. 6 months since they had slaughtered his parents, his friends, and nearly everyone he had ever known. Now, at 15, Ethan was all that remained of his family, leading a small band of survivors, children like himself who had managed to escape the massacre and were now hiding in the wild. The Kael'var were relentless in their search, but they underestimated the determination of the young humans they hunted. Ethan had learned to navigate the dense forests of Haven like a native, using the terrain to his advantage. His small group had survived on scraps and scavenged supplies, but they were more than just survivors. They were becoming something more, something the Kael'var had never expected. Behind him, Lara shifted slightly, her blue eyes reflecting the faint light from the alien searchlights. She was the group's tech expert, a genius with anything electronic, and she had already salvaged enough from the ruins of old human outposts to keep them one step ahead of the Kael'var. But tonight, they were taking a bigger risk than ever before. "We've got about 5 minutes before they loop back this way," Lara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the alien machinery. Ethan nodded, signaling for the others to move. There were 5 of them in total: Lara, the twins Alex and Emma, the youngest of the group at 12, and Jonah, who at 16 was the oldest besides Ethan. Together, they crept through the underbrush, careful to avoid any noise that might give them away. Their target was a Kael'var supply drop, one of many scattered across the forest to keep the occupying forces fed and armed. The plan was simple: get in, grab what they could, and get out before the patrols returned. It was a dangerous mission, but they needed the supplies. Their hidden base in the mountains was running low, and with winter approaching, they couldn't afford to wait. As they approached the clearing where the drop was located, Ethan signaled for them to stop. He surveyed the area, his sharp eyes picking out the telltale signs of Kael'var traps, tripwires, motion sensors, and more. They had grown more cautious after the last raid, where Ethan's group had managed to steal a crate of rations without being detected. "Lara, see if you can disable those sensors," Ethan murmured. She nodded, crawling forward with a small device she had cobbled together from spare parts. It took her only a few moments to find the first sensor and deactivate it. One by one, she disabled the traps, creating a safe path to the supply drop. Ethan gave her a quick nod of approval before signaling for the others to move in. They moved quickly, working in silence as they pried open the crates and filled their packs with whatever they could carry. It wasn't much: some food, a few medical supplies, and, most importantly, a cache of energy cells that Lara said could power their makeshift defenses for weeks. Just as they were about to leave, Ethan heard a noise that made his blood run cold: the unmistakable sound of Kael'var boots crunching on gravel. The patrol was returning earlier than expected. "Scatter," he hissed, and they all bolted in different directions. Just as the first Kael'var soldier stepped into the clearing, Ethan dove behind a large rock, heart pounding in his chest. He could see the alien's glowing red eyes scanning the area, and he held his breath, willing himself to become invisible. The Kael'var were tall, hulking creatures with armored exoskeletons and advanced weaponry, a terrifying sight even for a hardened survivor like Ethan. The alien barked something in its guttural language, and Ethan heard the rustle of movement as more soldiers entered the clearing. They were searching, but they hadn't seen him or the others. Yet, Ethan risked a glance toward the edge of the clearing and saw Lara crouched behind a tree, her eyes wide with fear. She was closest to the supply crates, and if the Kael'var decided to check them, she would be the first to be found. Without thinking, Ethan picked up a small rock and tossed it as far as he could to the opposite side of the clearing. It landed with a soft thud, but it was enough. The Kael'var soldiers turned, their attention drawn to the sound, and Lara took the opportunity to slip away, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan waited until the patrol had moved past him before slowly backing away. He knew the others would be doing the same, retreating to their rendezvous point deeper in the forest. They had all learned how to disappear in these woods, and he trusted that they would make it out safely. Once he was sure the patrol was far enough away, Ethan took off at a run, weaving through the trees until he reached the base of a steep hill. He climbed it quickly, using handholds worn into the rock over years of rain and wind. At the top, he paused to catch his breath and looked back. The clearing was just a faint glow in the distance now, and the forest was quiet once more. "Ethan!" Lara's voice called softly from a nearby thicket. He followed the sound and found the others huddled together in a small cave, their faces tense but relieved. They had all made it out. "Good work," Ethan said, his voice low but filled with pride. "Let's get back to base." They moved quickly and silently through the forest, taking a circuitous route to avoid any more patrols. The base, their sanctuary, was hidden deep within a network of caves in the mountains, far from the prying eyes of the Kael'var. It was a cold, damp place, but it was safe, and over the months, they had made it their home. When they finally reached the entrance, Jonah stepped forward to deactivate the energy field that kept their hideout cloaked from alien sensors. The air shimmered briefly as the field dropped, and they slipped inside, sealing it behind them. The interior of the base was dimly lit by scavenged lights powered by the very energy cells they had just stolen. It was a stark contrast to the harsh, white lights of the Kael'var ships, but it was home. Crates of supplies were stacked against the walls, and a large table in the center of the room served as their planning area. "Let's see what we've got," Ethan said, setting his pack down on the table. They emptied their packs, spreading out the contents. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going for a few more weeks. The energy cells were the most valuable find, and Lara immediately set to work integrating them into the base's power grid. As she worked, the others gathered around the table, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. They were all tired, but there was a fire in their eyes that hadn't been there before, a fire that had been kindled by their successes, small as they were. "We did good tonight," Ethan said, looking at each of them in turn. "But we can't get complacent. The Kael'var will tighten their patrols after this, and they'll be looking for us. So what do we do?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with nervousness. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "We keep fighting. We keep hitting them where it hurts. But we need to be smarter about it. We can't just react, we need to plan our moves, stay ahead of them." Jonah nodded in agreement. "We've been lucky so far, but we need more than luck if we're going to win this." Ethan agreed. They had survived on scraps and clever tricks, but they needed something more, a real plan. And that plan had been forming in Ethan's mind for weeks. "I've been thinking about that," he said slowly, drawing the others' attention. "We need to strike at their heart. Hit them where they least expect it." Emma frowned. "But how? They've got the whole planet locked down." "They do," Ethan acknowledged. "But they're spread thin. They've underestimated us because we're kids. They think we're just a nuisance. But if we can gather enough intel, find their weaknesses, we can launch a real attack. Something that will make them realize we're a serious threat." Lara looked up from her work, intrigued. "You're talking about going on the offensive?" Ethan nodded. "Exactly. We can't just keep running and hiding. We need to make them fear us." There was a moment of silence as the others absorbed his words. It was a dangerous idea, but it was also the first real plan that gave them a chance to do more than just survive. "I'm in," Jonah said firmly, breaking the silence. "If we can pull it off, it'll change everything." One by one, the others nodded in agreement. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and now it was taking root. Ethan felt a surge of determination. "All right. We'll start gathering intel tomorrow. Lara, I want you to work on tapping into their communication networks. We need to know their movements, their supply lines, everything. She nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. I can do that. It won't be easy, but I can do it. Jonah, I need you to scout their patrol routes. Find out where they're vulnerable. And Alex, Emma, I want you two to focus on booby traps and sabotage. Slow them down, make them waste resources. The twins exchanged a glance, their usual playfulness replaced by a steely resolve. We can handle that, Alex said. Ethan felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in months, they had a direction, a purpose beyond just staying alive. They were going to fight back. Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly. Lara managed to hack into the Kael'var's communication systems, giving them valuable insights into the aliens' movements and plans. Jonah's scouting missions revealed weak points in the patrols, and the twins became experts at setting traps that harassed the Kael'var and diverted their attention. As their confidence grew, so did their ambition. The small raids became more daring, and they began to stockpile weapons and supplies. They even managed to disable a Kael'var drone, reverse engineering it to use against the enemy, but Ethan knew that these small victories were just the beginning. The real challenge was still ahead, an all-out assault on the Kael'var command center, deep in the heart of the occupied city that had once been their home. The night of the attack came quickly. Ethan stood at the entrance to their base, looking out over the forest that had become their sanctuary. The others were gathered behind him, their faces set with determination. This is it, Ethan said quietly. We've done everything we can to prepare. Now, we take back our home. They moved through the forest like shadows, their movements silent and coordinated. Lara had disabled the perimeter sensors, and Jonah had mapped out the safest route to the city. As they approached, the glow of the alien structures loomed ahead, a stark reminder of everything they had lost. Ethan led the way, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the risks, they all did. But they also knew that this was their only chance. If they could pull this off, the Kael'var would never see them as just children again. They reached the outer wall of the command center, where Lara quickly went to work on the security systems. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity, but finally, the door slid open with a soft hiss. They slipped inside, moving through the dimly lit corridors with practiced precision. The Kael'var were caught off guard, no one had expected an attack from within. Ethan led them deeper into the facility, heading for the control room that Lara had identified as their primary target. When they reached the room, they found it lightly guarded. The Kael'var soldiers were no match for the determination and desperation of the young rebels. Ethan took down the last guard with a well-aimed shot from his salvaged blaster, and they were in. Lara immediately set to work on the control panel, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "Give me a minute," she muttered, her voice tense with concentration. Ethan stood guard at the door, his senses on high alert. He could hear the sounds of distant explosions. Jonah's team had set off a series of diversions to keep the Kael'var distracted. But they wouldn't be able to hold them off forever. "Got it!" Lara exclaimed, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "I've disabled the energy shields. The facility is vulnerable." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Jonah, now," he barked into his communicator. The response was immediate. A series of explosions rocked the facility as Jonah and the others detonated the charges they had planted earlier. The walls shook, and alarms blared, but Ethan kept his focus. They had to move quickly before the Kael'var could regroup. They raced through the facility, heading for the main power core. Without it, the Kael'var would lose control of the city's defenses, giving the rebels a fighting chance. The core room was heavily guarded, but Ethan and his team fought with everything they had. It was a brutal, desperate battle, but they were driven by the knowledge that this was their last hope. With a final, determined push, they breached the core's defenses and set the charges. "Let's go!" Ethan shouted, and they sprinted for the exit, the countdown ticking down in their ears. They made it out just in time. As they emerged into the cool night air, a massive explosion lit up the sky behind them, followed by a deafening roar as the facility crumbled to the ground. For a moment, there was silence, a stunned, disbelieving silence as they realized what they had accomplished. Then, slowly, the cheers began. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Kael'var, a blow that would echo across the galaxy. Ethan looked around at the faces of his friends, all of them dirty, exhausted, but alive. They had lost so much, but they had gained something, too, a sense of purpose, of power, of hope. As they began the long trek back to their base, Ethan couldn't help but think of the future. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The Kael'var would return, and they would come back stronger. But so would the rebels. They had proven that they could fight, that they could win, and that they were more than just orphans lost in the wilderness. They were warriors now, warriors with a home to defend and a cause to fight for. And as long as they had that, they would never be defeated. Ethan felt a surge of determination as he led his friends back into the forest. The night was dark, but the future, for the first time in a long while, felt bright.